Alright, what's going on everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one we are checking out the new Season Pass card dropping tonight, and that is Loki. Loki is a 3-cost 5-power that reads, on reveal, replace your hand with cards from your opponent's starting deck. Give them -1 cost. This card seems really crazy, really fun, and potentially even really good. So we're going to break it down here, talk about if this card is worth picking up, and look at some cool day one decks for it. Before we dive on into it, I do want to highlight the article in the description below from Safety Blade. Safety cooked up some really neat decks for this card, and if you want any more information on them or you just want to grab the code to import into the game for yourself, highly recommend checking out his article, link in the description below. We also have the Spotlight Cash Week up on the screen here. I included this because we've been including it in the past weeks because normally the card is in the Spotlight Cash. However, Loki Season Pass card, so he's not actually in the cash this week, but he will be made available through Series 5 starting next month. In terms of if this card is worth picking up, I think generally if you're going to be spending any money on Marvel Snap, the best bang for your buck undoubtedly is going to be the Season Pass. Not only do you get access to a new card that ends up being in Series 5, but you also get access to all the other stuff in the past, such as cosmetics and a bunch of various currencies, which will help you get more caches to get more cards. Another interesting application for Loki here is scouting. This is probably not overly relevant on ladder, as knowing your opponent's cards isn't usually as beneficial if you don't really have your own cards to interact with them anymore. However, in something like Conquest, being able to just get a lot of information about your opponent's deck, maybe during the first game when nobody's snapped, seems like it could be really beneficial for the rest of the series, or it could be really helpful if you're facing a bad matchup. You know your cards aren't going to be doing very much anyway versus that specific deck, so you can get rid of them and try and play your opponent's cards better than they can. So to me, I think this one's an easy buy. We don't really know how competitive or not this card is going to be. Obviously, it's a very RNG related effect, so very hard to predict in that sense. But on the other hand, cost reduction is always really powerful in card games. We've seen it be very powerful in Marvel Snap, so I would personally be surprised if Loki didn't end up shining in at least 1 or 2 powerful decks. So yeah, I'd recommend picking this one up. Let's dive into the day one decks. So starting off, we have Loki Collects. Now, one card you're going to be seeing, and I think pretty much all of these lists, is the Collector. Collector has pretty insane potential, as not only is he benefiting from us filling up our hand with card generation, but when Loki goes off and replaces our hand, he should get really big. We have some very powerful 1-drops to fill out our early curve with Nebula, Kitty Pryde, and Quinjet. Quinjet obviously making sense in a Loki or card generation deck, as all the things we generate are going to be even further reduced in cost. And if we get some big stuff like a 5-cost or a 6-cost off Loki, getting double cost reduction on it seems insanely powerful. Kitty Pryde and Nebula are 2 of the best 1-drops in the game, with Kitty Pryde in particular having really good synergy with Collector since she's bouncing to our hand each turn, and Angela, who when paired with Kitty ends up being one of the most powerful 2-drops in the whole game. Mirage is just a good 2-drop that's generating us a card, gives us a little bit of information about what the opponent has. Maybe it'll be something we can play, but you don't overly have to worry about that. And if you don't have Mirage, she can probably be pretty easily replaced with another 2-drop of card generation, such as Maria Hill or Cable. Armor acts as protection. We have some really good 1-drops. We don't want them dying to Killmonger, so Armor makes sense in that respect. And if we pump up our Angela or our Collector a bit too large, we don't have to worry about Shang-Chi if we have our Armor out. Sentinel, just another good 2-drop that replaces itself and has very good synergy with Quinjet. Agent Coulson is really nice because not only is he a decently statted body, but he's getting us 2 cards for the price of 1. Always good with Quinjet, but even better with Loki, or if we can get a bigger hand, we're getting more Loki value. There's also potential here with our other card we're including, Moon Girl. So with Moon Girl, we could do something pretty interesting where we could copy our kitties that are getting big, we could copy our collectors, play down 2 collectors on turn 5, and then use Agent Coulson into Loki to make those collectors really huge. On top of that, her copy effect is just really good with Quinjet in general, and I think she makes a lot of sense in this style of deck. Chavez is our final card here. Sometimes we'll be slamming her on turn 6, but the main purpose of Chavez in a deck like this is to help guarantee we get those important early game cards when we need them, such as our 1-drops or just some of our card generation. Next up, we have a bit of a more budget and thief list. And the idea with this one is we're the classic Moon Girl Devil Dino style of deck. However, we do have ways of actually stealing our opponent's cards instead of just copying them. So we have Mantis and Cable as our main ways of taking cards from the opponent so they no longer have access to them, while also serving the purpose of keeping our hand fairly large and pumping up our collector. Armor for that needed protection for a nice big dinosaur. Moon Girl to copy some of our powerful cards, namely Dino or even Mystique, so we can get a Dino down on turn 5 and copy it with 2 Mystiques on the final turn. Morph is probably a bit of a meme, but he definitely fits in the thematic point of this deck and trying to steal your opponent's stuff, and worst case, you can just throw him away with Loki and never have to play him. And then, as mentioned previously, Chavez, just a naturally really good card in this style of deck, as we do want to draw our early cards early, otherwise it really messes up our curve and kind of hinders what this deck is trying to do. Then we have a really spicy list here, the all-in gamble. I really like this one. If tech cards are something you like using, this is probably for you. So we make a pretty interesting take on the tech Sarah style, control Sarah style of deck, but a little bit differently. So the idea with this one is we have an invisible woman that we can hide our tech behind. So that way, if we are going to be using our Loki, we can potentially drop one of our powerful tech cards down earlier on, like Killmonger, or even our Shang-Chi or Enchantress. And that way, even if we do end up going for our Loki effect, we still have access to this tech card to hopefully help swing the game on the final turn. Spider-Ham is another interesting piece of interaction here, where he can really brick some powerful high-cost cards in the opponent's hand so they don't have access to them, and then maybe we can get a copy of that original card off of Loki so we get to use it and the opponent does not. Zabu's good for lowering the cost of our powerful tech cards here. In the event we're not going the Loki route, we can just lean on our tech cards like Killmonger, Shang, and Enchantress to help close out the game, especially if we're able to get down Sarah on turn 5. And Sarah's also a nice bonus here where we get a lot of cost reduction with the Loki cards or just with our own cards. So cost reduction, really good. Sarah definitely makes a lot of sense in this style of reactive deck. White Queen gives us a bit of information about the opponent and fits in with the theme of trying to know what they're doing and potentially do the stuff that they're doing, but better. Definitely replaceable. However, I think the versatility of Jeff being able to move around really can't be underrated, especially when it enables him to get into locations that can otherwise be troublesome for this style of deck. Next up, we have a Bounce style deck. So this one's pretty interesting. Bounce is a deck that's been kind of going under the radar, in my opinion. Obviously, it did get nerfed a while back. However, it's still a pretty powerful deck and not one I see a lot of people experimenting with. This one also focuses on some pretty decent interaction here. We have Iceman to slow down what the opponent's doing. We have Korg to hopefully give them a dead draw. Our other 1-drops here are the Hood and Kitty Pryde, who are natural bounce inclusions, as being able to bounce them to hand makes Kitty bigger, makes us more demons, just seems good generally overall. Angela, the best friend of Kitty Pryde, getting pumped up real large. Collector, same kind of deal, definitely takes advantage of the fact that we're returning a lot of cards to our hand. And later on in the game, we can potentially use Loki to get rid of some of those returned cards that might not be as useful for us going into the late game, to potentially get more powerful things to help close out the game. Mysterio Bishop, still really powerful in this style of deck, working very well together and keeps our opponent guessing a bit as to where we're going to be playing out our power for the final turn. Falcon, going to bounce our 1-drops back to hand for the Loki, or just being able to pre-buy those powerful 1-drop effects. And of course, America Chavez to help guarantee we get those really impactful 1-drops on turn 1 when we need them. It's possible you want to try to find room for Hitmonkey in this deck as well. However, because of the nature of Loki replacing cards and Hitmonkey being a 3 cost now, I think it's kind of hard to find time to do it all. So if you want to be running Hitmonkey, you might just want a more traditional version of Bounce rather than one that's trying to use the Loki. Loki is nice here not only as a potentially powerful finisher, copying the opponent's cards, but as an alternative game plan if we get kind of an awkward draw where we don't get our early game cards when we need them. And the last deck we have here is for all those Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. enjoyers out there. We have almost all the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cards in here. You probably could fit Maria Hill too if you wanted, but we think Zabu is going to be a better inclusion here for our powerful 4-drops. But basically, a lot of card generation going on here. Agent 13, Agent Coulson, Nick Fury, and of course, the one and only Helicarrier. Maybe Helicarrier will finally have a home with this deck. We can use Sift to discard the Helicarrier, not only pumping up our collector and giving us cards for Loki, but also being able to bring it back with Ghost Rider the following turn to put a big thing into play. This deck excels at keeping our hand nice and big, so that way we get the most value off Loki that is possible. Zabu, pretty strong in this deck, just being able to enable getting our 4-drops down a turn earlier. Probably Moon Girl or Nick Fury, but maybe sometimes Ghost Rider is relevant too, or just letting us be able to play 2 of those cards on the final turn is sometimes really important as well. As mentioned with our first Loki deck here, there is a really neat interaction here where you can use Moon Girl to copy the collector, get him down, and then on the final turn of the game, you can use Agent Coulson to generate some cards, or even Nick Fury if you have Zabu out, following up with Loki to make some really, really large collectors that should be hard to deal with. And of course, we have the Devil Dino in here because obvious synergy with Moon Girl, so we have another decent plan if we aren't going the Loki or card generation route. And Dino, just never really a bad thing to be doing as long as you're being mindful of the potential of Shang-Chi. This is also a bit more of a budget-friendly list, only including 1 Series 4 and above card, as well as Loki and the Season Pass card. Everything else here, Series 3 or below, so if you're looking for a deck that doesn't really need a whole ton of Series 4, Series 5 cards, this might be one that could be worth trying out. And there we have it. That is going to wrap it up for our Day 1 Loki decks. Again, highly recommend checking out the article from Safety Blade in the description below to grab the deck codes, or read up on his a bit more in-depth explanation going over the thought process behind all of these different decks. That's going to wrap it up for this video, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe, and stay tuned here at Marvel Snap Zone for all your Marvel Snap content. I'm Zombies, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.